Hi everyone, McBeard here, back with another card reveal video for you because we had 9 new reveals over the weekend, no less. People working hard over the weekend at CDPR to make sure that we have expansion news, and I'm sure everything ready for Gwent Open number 8, which is coming this weekend, March 16th and 17th. I'm leaving tomorrow on Tuesday, so that's pretty fun. I'm also totally swagged out here for this video because Gwent's pretty hype right now. I think the reveals are really, really awesome. I love that the community keeps rolling some stuff out. I'm not sure when it's going to stop, but we had another 3 reveals today and a bunch over the weekend. So I want to talk to you about that, and just want to let you know that because I'm leaving on Tuesday, I will be not home. I was also not home this weekend as well. I was at least paying very, very close attention to Gwent, and I was playing a large volume of games. I tried to put away, I think I put away like 40 or 50 games yesterday, and it's just to make sure that I have a fair level of expertise with everything. So we're about to crack into rank 2. I have the Villain Trettenmirth stained glass window. I just got to shut that door now, and I'm pretty proud considering that I've been playing pretty much everything, but it's been a delight because every faction has a viable deck to climb. Every faction. I strongly believe that. Even if you don't think that that Nilfgaard or Northern Realms is pushing it at the moment, there are still tons of great matchups, especially for Nilfgaard and Gurnakora land, let me tell you. So anyway, we're going to talk about the card reveals first, but I am also working on getting some deck guides out for you as well, because I'm pretty sure I can present these at a pretty good level of expertise. My only enemy right now is time, my friends. So it's been a lot of work to prepare because the cast and the event is #1 priority for me. Absolutely nothing comes before it. If I have time to play and if I have time to learn, I have to devote my time to that. But I do love you guys, and I do love making YouTube videos. So you're going to see vlogs from me and Flake, of course, and you're probably going to see a couple more card reveals. I'm not really sure what's going to happen when I leave, but I'll be out there. I'll be active. I'm enjoying being extra present on YouTube because it's a little bit more time friendly to me. Well, I can still push in a lot of Gwent games. Man, oh man. So much Gwent. It's really good right now, guys. The expansion is so exciting. Let's talk about some of these new cards. This is a reveal from Lord Bushwook. So if you don't know anything about Lord Bush, he is at Lord Bushwook and he plays Gwent. I play Gwent, his info is saying. Of course, the Sintra Knight is a Northern Realms 4 provision point card coming in at 2 strength with a deploy effect on the melee row only. Damage a unit by 2. Death blow, gain vitality for 2 turns. So, as Lord Bush says, it is a conditional 6. It does shore up any Northern Realms deck at the 4 slot. And this is another in a series of cards that we're seeing that a lot of people, including myself, are calling the better wolf pack kind of situation that Haymay Spear Maiden is now in. Slave Driver has always occupied this space. And of course, Pirate Captain is a very strong card. And of course, Damn Sorceress is a very strong card. Marauder is a very strong card. I think that this is just another great, interesting choice. And I think that since most of the reveals we've seen have been around 4 to 5, we're seeing more variations than ever before at the bottom end of a deck of how to build these decks. So I think that that's going to have implications. I mean, that doesn't even include the differences between lock and how status works now, and how lock no longer affects statuses and only card text and ability, and then how statuses will be something that you should always be playing around or thinking about, especially shield. I have a pretty strong inkling that shield is going to be pretty good. So watch out for that. Vitality in this case, he just makes himself a boosty boy just for a little bit longer. So, Lyrian Scytheman likes this card. If you're playing against monsters, you need to kill a Drowner. You should like this card as well. You have to play him on the melee row, but he has no reach, so you can hit anything you want as long as you can kill it. And of course, there's always the idea that if you really cared about killing your opponent's stuff, you can play cards like Villum, Vernon Roach, and things and put stuff on your opponent's board that you are going to kill. Now, that's obviously a ridiculous example. Turn 1 Prince Villum, of course, you would never do that. But I'm just using that as an example because Sabrina is just another example of one of the many disloyal cards that Northern Realms has at their disposal. Second card we saw on the weekend was the Svalblood Ravager. This was revealed by Shinmiri. Find him at Shinmiri2, of course, streaming as well. And of course, all the links to these tweets can be found in the description below. So check those out. Check out these streamers, of course. All these people supporting the community for a long time. We have another 4.2 strength provisional, very good kind of bottom of the deck card here for Skellige. Now, of course, all of these 4-point cards are a little bit more interesting for Skellige because you don't always have to play them. You can just discard them in a lot of situations. Maybe that makes up for the fact that this card looks not as good as the Sintra Knight. And only because I feel like he's just a little bit less proactive, as his condition is that he needs to be played a little bit later. But you could say that Skellige already has some pretty good proactive 4-point cards, especially an Incrate Marauder. Savage Bear is pretty good as well. So I'm not so offended by this, and I think that it's probably fine, especially if there's going to be a strategy based around cultists again, bleeding again. I feel like we have barely scratched the surface as to what the game can do and how the game can create points and combos based on status effects. But but bleeding is very clear. 2 turns of bleeding, 2 turns of damage. That's pretty much it right there. It's not really worth purifying, so anything you get a bleed on is probably going to die. Unless there's any reason to save it. So I just think that, you're just going to maybe get 6 points out of this card sometimes, and Skellige has been doing that for a while, so maybe that's why this one seemed a little underwhelming, but hey, we could be wrong. Moving right along, the Neckarat is back. Now it is a bronze engine, totally different art, totally different card. Only the name should be familiar. 6 provision point engine, something monsters don't really have, so you can liken this to Greatsword, let's say. So let's read the ability. On order, if this card is on melee row, a lot of conditions, so I'll give it that. Drain an enemy unit by 1 with a 2-turn cooldown. Whenever you play an organic card, reduce this unit's cooldown by 1. I feel like this card would be pretty good if it wasn't row locked, but it's just that one extra thing that's working against it, in addition to the fact that it doesn't have an on-deploy ability, and it has a 2-turn cooldown. But it's 6 provisions. I feel like this is probably something that would need to be attempted by one of the higher provision leaders like Woodland. So we'll have to see about that. We'll have to see who has room for something like this. But the idea that there's also synergy, there's synergy in here as well with organic cards, and I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly the kind of deck I'm gravitating towards. Something with Caranthir, Whispering Hillock, replaying Caranthir to play numerous engines, and maybe Whispering Hillock being an organic card. You may want to run some other organic cards. So I think that this engine is fairly unassuming. It seems to have so much going against it. Even if you have a shield on it, you just move it. So you can lock it, you can move it, and you can kill it, and it's a 6 provision bronze. So I think the bottom line is it has too much working against it. It probably won't see play, but it may be an interesting one-of in vampire decks. I think we need to understand that archetype a little bit better before we really call this one dead on arrival. All right, now this reveals one of my favorite cards. This one comes in from Green Cricket. Check out his YouTube reveal in the description below. This card is just so cool. There's a lot going on with this card. It doesn't mean that it's a good card, but it's a card that is very cool because it's an artifact with a deploy effect as opposed to an order effect that has Zeal. I feel like this card stares directly at Tainted Ale, which is another card that you would play on deploy to get something done, but you have a choice with Tainted Ale. This card needs to be activated right away. That is likely holding the card back for good reason, because if you could save it up, you could copy all sorts of crazy stuff if you had damage combos. However, damage combos with onboard reach is a little bit different because you can still set up damage combos and kill and steal a unit and replay it. It's not just the idea that you can do this to your opponent's units. It's also the idea that you can do this to the units that you put on your opponent's board, like Villain, like Sabrina, like Vernon Roach, Cantarella. Any of these cards you get to replay when you kill it on your opponent's side of the board. But there is more. This is also a card that can be brought back by Caretaker. So while this may seem like a special card, it is a very special card in that you can play it from your graveyard no matter what faction you're playing. So this now leads me to believe that there could be more of an artifact leaning package that some factions can just make really good use of. Also considering that you are playing a copy of a unit that you destroyed that may not be from your faction. Nilfgaard cares about this because of Assimilate. Nilfgaard likes this card even more because if you're playing artifacts that are staying on the board, you might as well play Combat Engineer, which is a 6-point card for 5, especially if you're playing. There could be more artifacts like this, or you could find other artifacts that you're fine just playing either a tutor with Avalok the Sage or a replay with Caretaker. Probably not both, but Morvran could probably afford something pretty wild at the top end with artifacts and Assimilate. So this card is expensive, so it probably won't see a lot of play because if it was any cheaper, this card would be probably competitive and fun enough to throw into a deck and really just make some crazy stuff happen. I think that this card is going to be the subject of a lot of highlights in the future, and possibly a disgusting combo or two. Look out for this card. This is one of my favorite cards that was revealed so far. Ah, yes, my friend and fellow caster Jaggers getting to reveal a new Nilfgaard card, and this card, boy, this continues the string of reveals of very strange Nilfgaard cards. I feel like we really need to know a lot about what the potential of this card can be in the world where the whole set is out there. The card is definitely not boring. There are some really interesting things you can do with this card. 9 provision point card though, so you would need this to be a strong combo piece, or at least something that's going to get you ahead when you're hurting it around. The Tourney Shaelmar comes in at 4 strength with a deploy effect that is different depending on the row you play it on. Something I love all the time, by the way. All the time in Gwent Homecoming, where we have 2 rows and they matter, having different effects on row is super cool. And Nilfgaard has a couple of these cards. Leo Bonhart is one of them. Asira is one of them as well. So there are a lot of them in the game, as there should be, and I hope they continue to be. Shaelmar definitely has 2 very, very different modes, though. On melee, damage a Nilfgaardian enemy unit by 7. So if you're playing a mirror, the Shaelmar can just punch out almost anything. 7 is a little on the high side. Usually the high units that you're going to see from Nilfgaard are Asira, Letho. But then there is a totally different mode on the ranged row. Boost self by 2 for every non-Nilfgaardian unit from your opponent's faction under your control. What is my opponent doing? What is my opponent playing? And how many of my opponent's faction cards am I able to get onto the board? So, how can you do this with Nilfgaard? Well, there's not a lot of ways, but there are some ways, and Assimilate leads me to believe that there will be a number of ways, because you're playing it from outside of your deck. Your opponent's deck is definitely outside of your deck, and this one cares about that. We do have Slave Hunter, which may not always get a faction card. It could get a neutral, so I don't even know if that's great, but it is still an option. It is still kind of on the charming side of Nilfgaard. And of course, there is Ardal. Ardal will take a unit over from the opponent's faction and put it on your side of the board. Bribery creates cards out of your opponent's deck, so if that effect sees any sort of expansion in any sort of way by playing a card out of your opponent's deck, Cantarella does this as well. Remember, Cantarella is at 1, Marching Orders is a tactic, Nilfgaard cares about tactics. There may be some really reliable ways to get these spies over to your opponent's board, so you can use the Shaelmar against the spy, or play something from your opponent's deck and then just get huge value in a long run later. Don't count this card out. It's weird. This is the kind of card you should want to see. Not all of them. You don't want to see them all like this. But you want your faction to be full of cards like this. Cards with strange potential that always keep you thinking, is there a way I can make this work? Those are the cards. They are the lifeblood of card games. And Nilfgaard got another reveal right after this, and kind of a pseudo extra reveal, although we don't know the second half of this combo here, but we do have Palmerin de Lawnfall. This is a new Nilfgaardian card that is very much like the Witchers currently, and it seems to be its own 2-card combo right now. So these are the famous Knight Errants that start you off in Blood and Wine. This is an 8 provision card coming in at 5 strength with the deploy effect. The second card, by the way, that Nilfgaard has got with strong deploy effects. So, you know, that's still very much a thing in Nilfgaard. So this has a deploy effect of damage an enemy unit by 2. Death Blow, give adjacent allied units shields. If Milton is in your hand, referring to Milton Perak Peran, if I have that correct, Milton de Perak Peran, I'll get that right. Thanks, Reddit. If Milton is in your hand, trigger the Death Blow on deploy. So if I'm holding Milton and I play Palmerin, it doesn't matter if I kill it, I give the shields anyway. So we're not really sure if the Knight Errants have anything going on, or knights in general, because we know that knights were popular in Toussaint. We know we're going to see more knights, even just suggesting that Milton is coming. So there maybe is some sort of knight archetype. What this card is doing that is very important is it's giving 2 shields if you can have units to stick. And there are likely situations where the units that you're protecting are engines, because there are good engines in Nilfgaard. We've already seen one Assimilate engine in the Diviner. With the introduction of new engine mechanics, we see scoia'tael is getting a lot of harmony mechanics in there. So if you're getting engines in your faction, you're going to want some way to put shields on a unit. So it's very possible that we can look at this card as my faction's best way to get a shield on an engine. We don't know how much Milton is. Milton could be very cheap. Milton's effect could also be like kick ass, and this could just be the gravy. Like, you may always want to play Milton first for all we know. If you are worried that this card is not going to be as game changing as you want it to be because you like these characters, unfortunately you kind of have to go through this. And a lot of people have already gone through this. Olgierd von Everec doesn't see any play. How important is that character? It's huge. It's a huge character, Olgierd. So, you know, until we get another Olgierd card, justice for Olgierd, and maybe Paul Marin might actually see play, something that Olgierd is not doing. So, moving right along, this card is a sad, sad story. This card reminds us that the Witcher world is dark, and we aren't going to always like what happens, and it's gritty, and it doesn't care about your feelings. This was revealed by Claymore Gwent, a Russian tournament organizer that put on a lot of cool tournaments online, so check them out. I will say that the lore for this card is on point. On deploy, the Heme Flaminica, the corrupted Flaminica, destroys an allied beast to the right, and then boosts self by its power and gives an enemy unit bleeding for the number of turns equal to the destroyed beast's power. Man, there is a lot happening in this card. This is like Skellige Consume. But remember, there are some really cool things you can do with this card. Morkvarg being played from hand doesn't happen very often, but if you do, Heme Flaminica can kill Morkvarg, who comes back. Heme is now a 9-point card that you just played from your hand, and also putting a 5-point bleed on your opponent's board. I'm going to say this card seems like it's a lot of value for its cost. This seems like almost risk-free. The only thing you need to have is a deck that cares about some beast cards, and Skellige has that, and this is support for that if you want to maybe try to make Bearmaster Skellige work. But even in the Morkvarg example, you have, like, that's a 14-point potential in a 6 provision point card. Like, you don't even need to get near that ceiling to already be pretty happy with your purchase. It's a good card. Like, it's got to be a good card. This card pushes an archetype. It's that good. It pushes Beast Skellige. And people will play Beast Skellige to put this card in that deck because it makes that deck better. This is a straight up upgrade in an existing archetype. But of course it includes current effects like bleeding, so it's just a great expansion card. Awesome job with the Corrupted Flaminica. Really sad about the bear. The story is sad, the card is good. What can you say? All right, the 8th card we saw is another 4 provision point monsters card coming into 2 strength. It is the Bruxa, presented by Lord of Gwent. Hop on over to his YouTube channel, throw him a subscribe. Polish player, Polish content creator that is getting to show us another vampire that could be at the bottom end of the deck, hanging out with Plumard, perhaps. She comes in 2 strength, deploy, damage an enemy unit by 2, death blow, gain thrive. So, I mean, there's not too much to say about this card because we know that Arcaspor was a very good card, and this is kind of a variation on what Arcaspor was. It's a card that deals damage and also gets thrive, but doesn't have the death wish that Arcaspor retained. So it's like the other half of Arcaspor. It's not just a better wolf pack. This is a much, much better wolf pack. And this isn't just a better wolf pack. Not only does this unit do all the stuff I said, Thrive is good, and it doesn't have a reach. It doesn't have a row restriction. This is just a really good 4-point card for monsters, as if they needed it. But the card is just really, really good. When you compare it to the Sintra Knight, seems much better in what it's trying to do, less restrictions. You compare it to the Svalbard Ravager that we saw as well. You know, if these are all kind of in a lineup together saying, you know, what's the best 4-point card, we're flexing. This one is really good. This one is going to get a lot done for you. And with bleed effects bringing units down to close to 2, probably, I imagine that's pretty easy. Just throw a bleed on a 3, wait for it to get there, kill it off with the Bruxa, and now you're thriving from there. You have 3-point Plumards to play, etc., etc. I think a deck built around vampires is including this card, or I am crazy. Last card we're going to talk about today is the Dryad Matron, revealed by Sir Pumpkin, Team Complexity's Sir Pumpkin. Check him out at Sir Pumpkin, streaming on Twitch every day for lots of time. And he's a big fan of this card, I imagine, because he is a fan of scoia'tael. So he got a pretty cool one here. Now, this isn't a Harmony engine. This is different. This is just a 5-point engine, something that scoia'tael hasn't really had really strong access to. Not to the level of the engines that Northern Realms has, the engines that Monsters have, just by having good Thrive units at 5. This is the Dryad Matron, 5 provision point engine coming in at 3. Every allied turn on turn end, move to the rightmost spot on this row, and boost an allied unit to the left by 1. Again, another card where there's a lot happening. So apparently if you have 2 of them next to each other, they will just do a little dance and they'll boost each other every turn, which sounds terrifying. But I gotta say, there's some pretty cool news here. There's some pretty cool news here in the reveal thread, which was not that long ago. Chief RRC tweets out back to Gwent saying, it's a really nice card, but Could it work with Dolblathanus Sentry? And if you're not familiar with the Sentry boosts an ally whenever another ally moves. And Ryshik, one of the designers on the Gwent team, is confirming that this card already works with Sentry. So this is Sentry. This is an elf card that works with a Dryad engine that actually, now that engine makes sense because these two engines are now snowballing into each other. This is a totally different thing now. Engine scoia'tael is going to be on the map, and it's not going to just be Northern Realms and Nilfgaard that are going to say, hey, you know, early around we can put out some pretty scary stuff if you can't deal with it. I think scoia'tael is going to have this new identity here, because between this harmony and this information about Dolblathanus Sentry, it may even be just scratching the surface. But now we're, of course, talking about adding a whole new race and probably a lot of synergy between all the races. So let's go. Scoia'tael is going to get a totally new archetype, I think, in this card that has multiple benefits in boosting things, in moving around, and this card is amazing. This card is an amazing reveal right here, and I'm glad we're ending it on this one. This card is super promising. I think the scoia'tael's been getting some absolutely awesome reveals. The Giant Oak, all the Harmony engines. None of the cards have looked like duds for scoia'tael. Sarissa looks really, really good. Even the Ranger, like the Harmony engine that deals damage, was still awesome. The Forest Whisperer is a modal card in bronze. scoia'tael just got some good cards, honestly. Maybe the Mantis Trap, somewhat underwhelming, even though it's a completely unique card that you've never seen anything like it before, that has a new mechanic. You could do a lot worse for a card that makes you raise your eyebrows, right? So scoia'tael is getting like serious work done here. So if they're able to build a core of cards that not only care about themselves in Dryads, but also provide boosts, which scoia'tael also care about, but also provide reasons to play different races, you know, just be the glue that holds those bronzes together. This could be one of many cards we'll see for scoia'tael that will just improve the quality of deck building, which I think is going to get a massive improvement overall. Guys, I've been rambling for too long. Thanks so much for watching the video. If you like the video, it's YouTube, you know what to do. Show me and tell me. That's all I want, and your support means the world to me. I'll see you next time.